ततो जयावधीरे नष्टप्रयेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवते उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवतिर्नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनकारणं परमानन्दं माधवम्। So resuming our discussion, Canto 5, Chapter 13, verse 13. So this is essentially the narration of the allegorical story of a merchant who enters into a forest and what he experiences over there. And the attack of the animals and of the insects, being bewildered by what's there in the forest. And as will be explained in the next chapter and in the purpose also, that the merchant represents the conditioned living entity, and the forest represents the material world, right? And essentially, the different trials and tribulations that he experiences are either metaphors of the challenges that the living entity faces in this material world, or sometimes they are direct narrations of the challenges. Okay, so we'll resume from verse 30. Anyo nivita vyati sangvrda veranubandho vivam mitascha advanyam shumin urukrat stravitta bado pasarge viharan vipanna. Sai Prabhu, can you read the translation, please?
Yes. Due to monetary transactions, relationship become very strained and end in enmity. Sometimes the husband and wife work on the path of material progress, and to maintain their relationship, they work very hard. Sometimes, due to scarcity of money or due to disease conditions, they are embarrassed and almost die.
So this is the challenges of the nature of the relationship, and this is especially relationships of family, not so much friends. Could also means friends, but also family. That due to monetary transaction, relationships become very strained and ending enmity. Right? So in the Mahabharata, it is said that if you value friendship, do not ask for money. And if you give money in friendship, do not expect return. So it's like the key for maintaining good relationships. Because asking money either means that the person might say no, or if the person says yes, then he feels that you should be indebted to him. And the converse side is that if you give money and you do not get it back, or you do not get it back with the gratitude that you expect, then the relationship becomes strained. There's a humorous short story. I forget the name of the author, very popular author. The title of the short story is My $1. And it's something like the person who's fairly wealthy, has a friend who's fairly wealthy, and they go on. The friend happens to visit him, comes in a taxi, and does not have the exact change. So then this friend says, "Oh, you need $1, here's $1." And he says, "Okay, thank you, I'll give it to you later on." Says, "Okay." And then the rest of the story is about the person. Now, $1 was very small value for both of them. Now, the person who took the $1 forgot all about it, but the person who gave the $1, he never forgot about it. So the rest of the life, he kept reminding him through indirect means. Have you settled all your debts? And it is important to keep change. Have you had a situation where you were inconvenienced because of lack of change? And the other person simply did not make the connection. He would just give nondescript answers to it. Right. So the kind of story ends with this person lamenting about the fact that he gave $1 to his friend. I mean, the story is humorous, but I think these authors, they use humor to reflect the underlying tensions in the society. So yes, so as this verse says, that giving and taking money or even favors, it is a recipe for disaster. And the husband and the wife walk on the path of material progress. Yeah, so this is a married couple that are not walking on the path of spirituality, which is what the ashram is supposed to do. But to maintain the relationship, they work very hard. Right? So it's interesting that 5,000 years ago, this point was made, and it's so true. It was true then, and it's even true now. And it's said that in the US, amongst the top reasons for couples separating is financial issues. That either there is expectation of the wife expects more money from the husband, or the husband expects the wife to contribute more, or they feel there's money being withheld. And one of our friends is a marriage counselor in Bombay, and he was also sharing this, that it's amazing, even in fairly well-to-do couples, where you would think that money is not a problem, but when they come for counseling, then there's a lot of suspicion. The husband thinks that the wife is hiding money from him. The wife thinks the same, and neither of them need the money, but it just causes a lot of angst. And if there is scarcity, like Jed Paris said, they're embarrassed and almost die. So it becomes so life draining. Prabhupada says that one becomes diseased or monetarily embarrassed. In the modern age, most countries have developed economically, but due to business exchange, relationships seem to be strained. Wars are declared between nations. As Prabhupada said, this is not just tension between individuals, it's tension between countries. Right? So we see this current annexation of Ukraine with Russia, by Russia. Essentially, it's a matter of economics. That Ukraine has grown up to be a fairly rich country. Natural minerals they grow a lot of wheat also, and essentially Russia wants that, and there's strategic reasons also. Russia was scared that Ukraine was going to join the NATO and put them at a disadvantage. But like the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, it was basically just for Iraq had completely depleted their coffers with this long war with Iran, and Kuwait was a small country that was very, very rich. So essentially, they just wanted that. So like Prabhupada says that this all bubbles up from individuals to families to society and ultimately to the country. Okay, verse 14. Tam stan vipannan sahitatra tatra vihaya jatam parigraya sartha avartate dyapi nakaschidatra viradvanaparam upaiti yogam.
My dear king, on the first path of material life, first a person is bereft of his father and mother, and after their death, he becomes attached to his newly born children. In this way, he wanders on the path of material progress and is eventually embarrassed. Nonetheless, no one knows how to get out of this, even up to the moment of death.
So in the Puranjan pastime, very similar point is made that in the Pravrati Marg, which is the marg of enjoyment, people are busy celebrating the ritualistic ceremonies of birth and death and marriage, etc. And therefore they miss the purpose of life. Right? So this verse talks about how this conception, it goes from generation to generation. So vipannan means giving up the dead. So this refers to the parents. So the children, when they grow up, they give up the dead parents, and they replace that with the attachment to the children. Right? So first a person is bereft of father and mother, and then becomes attached to the newly born children. So there is no opportunity to develop renunciation. Right? One might say that when the relationships end, then the person automatically becomes more detached. But the nature is such that the attachment always stays, the object keeps changing. When children are small, they're very attached to the parents. Right? Everything they want to do with the parents, and they want to spend as much time with the parents as possible. When the children grow older, they don't want anything to do with the parents. The parents are like they're like a burden. Right? Even if the children are well-meaning, but they do consider that give me my space, give me my time, lack of interference. But that affection still remains. Now the object of the affection becomes their own children. And I've seen this around me. We've been going to the temple for a long time. So we have seen like young adults with children, then the children growing up, and then they would lament, oh, now my son has no time for me. He's busy with his wife. Time for me to do bhakti. And next thing, what do you know? The children have children. So now the affection now gets directed towards their grandchildren. So you see them carrying forth their grandchildren, taking care of them. The children are busy with their work. So this material world is designed to give one so many reposes, so many areas where they can repose their affection. Like even for people who are not married, they direct their affection to something. Somebody likes cars, somebody likes house, somebody likes traveling. So that's what keeps us going. I need to. One of my colleagues has this vow, so to speak, that every year, 1 month, he takes off and he goes to a new place. And he's been doing that for the last 30 years. Right? So that's a big thing, that every year he goes to a new place. That's where his Once he comes back, he starts planning for the next year. So the material world is like they say, like a kid in the candy shop. There are so many varieties of candies that attracts the children, and they may get tired of one, but there is something else. So Srila Prabhupada also, Jat Bharat is lamenting about this, and Srila Prabhupada also laments, saying that no one accepts the spiritual process of knowledge and renunciation, which end in Bhakti Yoga. Right? So the process of Jnana and Vairagya that results in Bhakti. Actually, human life is meant for Jnana and Vairagya, knowledge and renunciation. Through these, one can attain the platform of devotional service. So it's an important point. Prabhupada makes it twice. Unfortunately, people in this age avoid the association of people, liberated people, sadhu sang, and continue the stereotyped way of life. Thus, they are embarrassed by the exchange of money and sex. Okay, moving on. Verse 15. Manasvino nirjita diggajendra mame sarve bhuvibadvera mridhe sharyaran natu tad brajanti yanyastadando gatavairubhyati.
There were and are many political and social heroes who has conquered enemies of equal power. Yet, due to their ignorance in believing that the land is theirs, they fight one another and lay down their life in battle. They are not able to take up the spiritual path accepted by those in the renounced order. Although they are big heroes and political leaders, they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization.
So this verse is contrasting material achievement with respect to spiritual achievement, right? So and there are people who are expert in manipulating the material energy. And so Jatpara says there are political and social heroes who have conquered enemies of equal power. Right? So there are others like them also who are political and social heroes, and they have conquered them. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that there are great warriors who can defeat even the elephants of the direction. He uses just a metaphor of, so this is like Digvijay. Wherever the person, whichever direction the person goes, he is victorious. So there are great warriors who can defeat the elephants of the direction, but they cannot conquer the enemies that is closest to them. Right? So they may travel far and wide to defeat enemies, but they cannot defeat their 11 senses. And Chakravarti Pad continues to say that thinking in terms of mind, they die in the battlefield. Right? So this is their destination. So Alexander was one such person that at a very young age, he was able to conquer a lot, create an empire that was one of the largest empires in human history. But when he found out that he had a terminal disease, then he became completely bewildered. So he was able to conquer death from the perspective of awarding death to others. Like his army was famous for being very brutal. They would massacre complete kingdoms. So he was able to conquer death and give it to others. But when it came knocking on his doorstep, then he became completely bewildered. Right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti says, because why? thinking in terms of Maya, they die in the battlefield because they're thinking of their body, their own existence. And then spiritual courage is described. Real courage is having no enmity and giving up all material attachments. Right? So it does not take courage to make enemies. It takes courage to give up enemies. Right? It does not take courage to establish material attachments and then conquer them. It takes courage to give up material attachments. And so Srila Prabhupada says that not being able to conquer these nearby enemies, which is their senses, they simply try to conquer other enemies and ultimately die in the struggle of existence. They do not take to the path of spiritual realization or become sannyasis. Sometimes these big leaders take up the guise of a sannyasi and call themselves Mahatmas. So Prabhupada is indirectly referring to Gandhi, and that he was addressed as Mahatma Gandhi, and he led a so-called renounced life. Like he wore very simple clothes that he spun himself, lived a very, very austere life. But essentially, like Prabhupada says, for such people, the only business is conquering their political enemies. Right? So essentially, it was to create an aura that attracted people and defeated the political enemies. Because they spoiled their lives with the illusion of this is my land and my family, they cannot progress spiritually and attain liberation from the clutches of Maya. In a letter that Prabhupada wrote to Mahatma Gandhi, so he started off with some level of glorification, that you have been endowed with this ability to attract people, and you're a prominent personality. But then he also becomes very, very heavy on them, saying that don't misuse this. You use it for the proper purpose. And otherwise, you will die on the street like a dog. And Prabhupada's prediction actually came true. In the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, King Muchukananda, he prays to Krishna. In his prayer, he says about materialistic men that having conquered the entire circle of directions and being thus free of conflict, a man sits on a splendid throne, receiving praise from leaders who were once his equals. But when he enters the woman's chambers, where sex pleasure is found, he is led about like a pet animal, O Lord. So Muchukananda, as we know, he served Indra for a long time. He was a great warrior. And when Indra was being harassed by the Asuras, then he took help from Muchukananda. And at the end of a very, very long battle, when Indra wanted to give him a benediction, he asked him what benediction you want, and Muchukananda said, how much time I have to live. No, that was Khatpanka. Muchukananda actually asked for a different benediction. He asked for, I'm very tired after this long battle. So give me this benediction of uninterrupted sleep. And if anybody interrupts it, then I should die. So Krishna uses that benediction to kill Kali there. So Muchukananda had personal experience of this. He himself was a great emperor, and he was also observing Indra. That Indra was fighting and defeating everybody and sitting on a splendid throne. But ultimately, he was, he being a demigod, he was also very much indulging in sense gratification. Okay, moving on. to verse 16. Prasajjati kwapi lakambujashrayas tadashraya vakta padadvijaspraha kvachit kadachit dharichakratastrashan sakyam vidate bakakam.
Sometimes the living entity in the forest of material existence takes shelter of creepers and desires to hear the chirping of the bird in those creepers. Being afraid of roaring lion in the forest, he makes friends with crane, heron, and vultures.
So here again, Chet Bharat turns to using metaphors. So earlier on, we were saying that he was speaking directly, not allegorically. Now he is speaking more from a allegorical perspectives. So in the forest of material existence, the person takes shelters of creepers. So the creepers is described as the arms of a woman. So essentially, this is another way of saying that the person indulges in sex gratification. That he desires to hear the birds, which cannot be heard because they are sleeping in the creepers. So this refers to the inaudible sounds of the woman while embracing a man. And Dvija refers to Brahman, but said twice born. So here it refers to the children that are born out of this union. So he desires to see and touch, basically be affectionate to his children. So the second part of the verse says, be afraid of roaring lions in the forest. He makes friends with cranes, herons, and vultures. So the roaring lions are like sadhus. They're like simagurus. And they're loudly proclaiming the futility of the material life, the dangers of the material life. And then there are cranes and herons and vultures, which are the pseudo-gurus. Right? So the lions the real gurus will talk about the futility of the material life, the danger of material existence, and the suffering that is in store. But the pretenders, they will give them fake assurances, right? So they will say that, don't worry, your life is, God has given you this life for enjoyment. So by enjoying, you can cross over the ocean of material suffering. So they will say things that are pleasing to hear, but ultimately they are, so that the vultures will even eat or actually only eat the food that is picked from dead, from carrions. And the pseudo-gurus, they're like vultures. They will make the person spiritually dead. And then they will pick the person clean of any they will steal their wealth, they will steal their karma, they will steal their opportunities for any spiritual advantage. But the fault is that of the person. That not understanding that the lions are roaring for the benefit, the person makes friends with these vultures. So Prabhupada talks about how the person is happy to be embraced by the creeper-like arms of his wife. Within the creepers, there are many chirping birds. So this is the sweet voice of his wife. In old age, he becomes afraid of imminent death, which is compared to a roaring lion. So Prabhupada gives a similar understanding that the roaring lion is like imminent death, or it could also be considered to be sadhus who are talking about imminent death. Right. So to save from the lion's attack, he takes shelters of bogus swami, yogis, incarnations, pretenders, and cheaters, and then he spoils his life. So Prabhupada said, it is said, Harim Vina Mritam Na Taranti. No one can be saved from imminent danger of death without taking shelter of Hari, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is one of the meanings of Hari. That so the Lord may not take away death, but the Lord will take away the fear of death. And Prabhupada says that the word Hari indicates the lion as well. There's in one of the plays written by, I believe, Rupa Goswami, there is this humorous conversation that Krishna goes and knocks on the door of Srimati Radharani, and from the other side, the gopi there says that, who are you? And essentially, it's a play on the names of Krishna. So at one point, Krishna says, I am Hari. And the gopis say, oh, there's a lion outside, there's a lion outside. And Krishna said, no, I'm not Hari, I am Sham Sundar. And so then they extract a different meaning of Sham Sundar. So this way, Krishna talks about his different names, and the gopis very intelligently, they tease Krishna by deriving different names. So Hari means lion as well. So Prabhupada says, to be saved from the hands of the lion of death, one must take shelter of the supreme lion, the supreme Hari. Okay, verse 17. Te vanchito hamsakulam samavishan arochayan shilam upeti vanaram tacchatirasena sunivritendriya paras parodvikshana vimastravidi.
Being cheated by them, the living entity in the forest of the material world tries to give up the association of those so-called yogis, swamis, and incarnation, and come to the association of real devotees. But due to misfortune, he cannot follow the instruction of the spiritual master or advanced devotees. Therefore, he gives up the companies and again returns to the association of monkeys who are simply interested in sense gratification and women. He derives satisfaction by associating with sense gratifiers and enjoying sex and intoxication. In this way, he spoils his life simply by indulging in sex and intoxication. Looking into the faces of other sense gratifiers, he becomes forgetful and thus approaches death.
So this talks about as the materialist, he goes through life. The nature of the material world is that it forces the person to have realizations, right? That's why the material world is created. That the original cause of the person falling to the material world is looking for enjoyment. The material world offers this understanding that there is no real enjoyment in the material world. Real enjoyment is only available in the spiritual world. So even if the person is a gross materialist, then inevitably they will come to this realization that the material world is a place of suffering. But now what does he do when he comes to this realization? Similar theme as the last verse. So in looking for answers, he tries to he tries to go towards those who have the answers, those who are spiritually advanced. Right? But unfortunately, he is not able to follow their instruction. This is due to misfortune, he cannot follow the instructions of the spiritual master or advanced devotees. Why is that? Because it goes against the grain that has been set up by this living entity after years and years of I, me, mine, material enjoyment. So it goes against that grain. So when the spiritual master says you have to follow the regulative principles, you have to serve others, develop humility, and the person might say that all my life I have been served by others. At least in his mind he would think, all my life I have been served by others. Why should I be now serving others? Or all my life I have aspired for material enjoyment. Now that I'm comfortable, I have some wealth, I have some status, why should I not enjoy? So these instructions become unpalatable. Right? We see this when Srila Prabhupada came to the US, then he was instructing mostly young people, very, very young, 20s. I think I was reading in Mukul Maharaj's book, Miracle on 26th, 2nd Avenue. At the time when Maharaj met Srila Prabhupada, he was 26 years old. And he was considered to be like some of the other devotees, they would call him a grandfather. So he was considered jokingly, but he was considered to be very old because there were others who were in the 20s, some were even in the teens. So they were not well established in this whole conception of that I am socially properly situated, I am rich. In fact, the opposite of that. But when he was preaching in India, then a lot of people that he was preaching were in this mood. And very difficult to preach to them. So his one of his conversations that one of the person who used to accompany him for a walk in the morning in Bombay, I think his name was Dr. Patel, and he was a businessman, right? And Prabhupada had some kind of affection for him, so Prabhupada would engage him in conversations, but he kept going back to this point that why shouldn't we enjoy the world? Krishna has given us the senses to enjoy. He has given us the object of the senses to enjoy. Then why should we deprive Krishna of by rejecting the facilities that he has given, right? And they had some kind of a friendly relationship. We had a lot of respect for Prabhupada, but he was so set in his ways that he could not just accept the instructions of a person who was speaking completely on a spiritual platform. That yes, Krishna has given you the senses, but Rishikesha, Rishikena, right? Basically to use them in the service of Krishna. That yes, Krishna has given so many material objects, but anasaktasya vishyan yathato priyajata. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Iktam Vairagyam Chite, is to use them in the service of Krishna, and while using them in the service of Krishna, you can also enjoy. So because they're unable to follow the instructions, but they have this desire to address this angst in them, that this material world is troubling them, so Jad Bharat says that he returns to the association of monkeys who are simply interested in sense gratification and women. Right? So monkeys, in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks how the monkeys are, what is it called? Markat Vairagya. Right? So the monkeys, they will sit on the branch and they will appear to be very wise, they will appear to be meditating, but essentially they're looking to steal fruits, or they're looking to have sex with other monkeys. So there's a difference between the external and internal. He derives satisfaction by associating with sense gratifiers and enjoying sex and intoxication. And then he simply spoils his life and becomes forgetful of the approaching death. So this is how people, they protect themselves. Because when they reach the point where they see death around the corner, then they become bewildered. Death is approaching. And this material world is definitely not a place of happiness. It's the intrinsic realization of the soul. But in order to cover that dissatisfaction, they redirect these longings to material objects. So they indulge even more in intoxication, even more in sense gratification, and it's a kind of anesthesia that they give themselves, that they become so busy in this that they forget that, or they make themselves forget that death is approaching. So Prabhupada makes this point that sometimes a foolish person becomes disgusted with bad association and comes to the association of devotees and brahmanas and takes initiation from a spiritual master. As advised by the spiritual master, he tries to follow the regulative principles, but due to misfortune, he cannot follow the instructions. He gives up the company of devotees and goes to associate with simian people. Simian means ape-like, monkey, who are simply interested in sex and intoxication. So in one of the temples, there was this devotee who was really big and strong. And so other devotees, I guess they took advantage of his physical strength, and they would basically ask him to do the heavy lifting kind of work. And then he became so fried out. Prabhupada tried to counsel him. He essentially then left the temple. And I think it so happened, so he left the temple, and then he got a job in which he was doing exactly the same thing. That he was basically lifting weights, he was loading and unloading trucks, he was working in a gas station. So once Prabhupada happened to be in the gas station and he was pumping gas. So he looked at Prabhupada, Prabhupada looked at him, and then very defiantly he said, at least I am free now. And then Prabhupada looked at him and said, oh, are you free from death? Are you free from disease and old age? And then he just kept quiet, didn't say anything. So sometimes when we take to spiritual life, we have a lot of challenges, either from within or around us, but then we are quick to give it up because we think that this is optional. We may have the same challenges in the material life, but we'll persevere. We may have colleagues at work who are causing trouble. We may have a boss who is causing anxiety, or we may have family members who are creating disturbance. But we persevere. It's not that we leave our job. We'll still keep our ego aside and do the job, or we'll still take the extra step to maintain family relationship. But when the same thing happens in the spiritual life, then very quickly people will give it up. There was once a young devotee at the temple, and he came to the temple, and very nice young boy, and he had a nice service attitude, and some fault of the devotee also, that they started piling a lot of services on him, and he had this problem that he could not say no. So as soon as he would come, people knew that, okay, he has come now. Somebody would say, can you help set up the prasadam table? Can you help carry this? Can you come in the evening and do this? Can you come in the morning and drive me to the airport? And he became so fried out that he left, stopped coming to the temple. He did not take initiation, etc. He was still at the early stage. But he used to work in DC. And so one day when I was going out for a walk, I saw him walking around. So I kind of called him. He said, how come I don't see you at the temple? And initially he said, oh, no, I understand it. I'm very busy. Life is, there are many things going on. I'll definitely come. And since he was new, I didn't want to directly preach to him. But I did make this point that the nature of life is that there will always be challenges. And you have to balance. You have to balance things. So you're balancing things in your material life, you have to balance things in your spiritual life. There are some services that you can do, some services you cannot do. Some devotees you can help, some devotees you cannot help. So we expend so much of our energy balancing things in our material life. But we refuse to expend even an ounce of energy balancing things in our spiritual life. And that is our biggest loss, because then we're quickly giving it up. Oh, this is optional. What's the impact of us? This service is causing anxiety. Let's give it up, right? So we deprive ourselves of that service. And to some extent, or to a great extent, this is because of the materialistic bent of mind, like this verse talks about. That when the person finds spirituality to be troublesome, then the person quickly gives up the spirituality and compensates for that by overindulging in the material aspect. Okay, we'll do one more verse and then we'll stop for any discussion. Verse 18. Drumeshuram shayan sutadharavatsalo vyavayadino vivasha subandhane vachit pramada girikandare patan valim grihitva gajabhita sthitah.
When the living entity becomes exactly like a monkey, jumping from one branch to another, he remains in the tree of our soul life without any profit but sex. Thus, he is kicked by his wife just like the he-ass. Unable to gain release, he remains helplessly in that position. Sometimes he falls victim of another incurable disease, which is like falling into a mountain cave. He becomes afraid of death, which is like the elephant in the back of that cave. He remains stranded, grasping at the twig and branches of a creeper.
So the verse essentially resonates the point that was made in the previous two verses. that a conditioned soul, he sacrifices so much for the so-called pleasure of household life. So he desires pleasure in sex life, but the example is given that he's kicked by his wife just like a he-ass. So Prabhupada would explain that when the he-ass approaches the she-ass for sex, for whatever reason, the person gets repeatedly kicked, or the ass gets repeatedly kicked by the she-ass, but if he perseveres, then he finally gets to mate with her. And that kind of describes the situation that the conditioned materialist, he keeps going back to his wife for enjoyment and sex, and he keeps getting berated by her. But unfortunately, he does not know anything different. And then as life goes on, so he said he falls in a mountain cave. So mountain cave is considered to be diseases. So falling into a mountain cave means the person becomes sick. And then in the cave, he becomes afraid of the elephant. So elephant is compared to death. So then as the person becomes older, diseases begin to appear in the body, and the person becomes more and more fearful of the impending death. But he somehow remains alive by vines. So vines are karma. So what this indicates that the person will die at the destined time. So he may be suffering from diseases. He may be constantly fearfully looking at death, but he still stays alive because it's not his time to die. Right? So in a way, this is, from a material perspective, this may look good, but from a transcendental perspective, this is the opposite. That the person is in the mountain cave and fearful of the elephant. The person is terribly sick, and there is imminent death, but yet he cannot die because it's not his time to die. So what happens? He just suffers and suffers and suffers. So Jat Bharat talks about, so he's talking about different phases of life. He was talking about enjoyment in material life, conquering all the directions. The young man who is going out to forcefully stake his claim on different kinds of enjoyment. And then how he moves forward, replaces his parents with his children. They now become the object of his affection. He has material dealings. Then as he grows older, and then he begins to feel the futility of material life. He looks for spiritual alternatives, but not being properly situated, is not able to follow the path of spirituality. So that desire, then he again redirects to even more material enjoyment. It's like they say they have this saying that I'm drowning my sorrows in liquor. So first problem is sorrows. The second is that you're trying to drown it with something that is even worse, liquor. There. So this is what a person does. That they have this angst, this dread of the material world by experience, and we all experientially also have that. But unable to follow the path recommended by the gurus and the sadhus, the person then goes to the false gurus and sadhus, and he basically drowns his fears in even more material enjoyment. But that enjoyment ultimately turns into even more suffering. If he's seeking enjoyment from his wife, then he suffers because of her reaction. If he's seeking enjoyment in the relatives, then the relationships get spoiled. And then as he gets older, the diseases step in. Imminent death appears, and not being prepared for it, the person is completely bewildered. But by the force of karma, he continues in this suffering. So at this point, it's too late for the person to remediate the situation. Now, theoretically, it's never too late. Like I was saying, Khatpanga said that only one moment is enough. Exceptional situations, Ajmail and such kings, to show the potency of bhakti. But practically, it's very, very, very difficult. I remember one of our friend's father. He was in hospice care, so he also knew. He knew that he didn't have long to live. That put him in hospice care, and we went to meet. And so we went with some pictures of Krishna, Tulsi, and some bhajan cassettes. So we talked to him for a while, and then we said that should we put this picture over here? Should we play this cassette? So he looked at the picture, and being Indian, he was pious. He gave obeisances, but he refused. He didn't allow us to put the picture there. He said, "No, take the cassette. I don't want to listen." There was, in the hospice, they gave a TV, and essentially the TV was playing whatever. I don't think he was even watching it, but the TV was playing. So at that time, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to change your conception. Right in the 8th chapter, where it is said that Antakale Chamameva. So if one thinks of Krishna at that moment, one gets a disposition like Krishna. And one of Prabhupada's disciples asked him this question, that why don't we live a life of material enjoyment and think of Krishna at the time of death? Prabhupada says not going to happen. So this is the Prabhupada said this is the precarious condition of a householder's life, which is full of misery. The only attraction is sex with wife who kicks him during sexual intercourse, just as a she-ass does a maid. Due to continuous sex life, he falls victim to many incurable diseases. At that time, being afraid of death, which is like an elephant, he remains hanging from the twigs and branches of a tree, just like a monkey. Okay, so let me pause here and see if we have any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah, it's completely relevant to at least myself. Most of the things that we talked about here, especially when it comes to being in Krishna consciousness, like coming into Krishna consciousness, and then we are, at least I still carry this material sense enjoying propensity, and it almost feels like that is my default position, and I'm trying to suppress it with the help of Krishna consciousness. And so that is a challenge, and then it comes up from time to time and shows its face, very ugly face also sometimes. So this is very, very interesting how, so now although we kind of know what to do, but it's always good to hear more and more about it, how we can develop a true position which is truly favorable towards Krishna consciousness, not artificially taking up, but then coming out of the default material sense enjoying propensity. So what do we have to do for that? That is one question. I have another question, but that I will ask after somebody else goes.
Thank you, Prabhu. So yeah, I can, just like you, I can also completely relate to everything that's been said. What can we do is what we are doing. We just need to do more of it. So the reason that we are even intelligently questioning the status quo is because we have received somebody's mercy. And, very few people will actually even question this, that is what I'm doing. They may feel the emptiness of it, but they will not question. And I remember once I was having a discussion. The person was, I guess, kind of a devotee, non-devotee. He was coming to Bhakti Riksha, but partially committed. And I was just talking to him, and I was just saying that last week it was very difficult for me. So he said, "How was it difficult for you?" And I said, I was getting up late in the morning, and my chanting was difficult. So I just feel bad about it. And then he very spontaneously responded, "That's the problem with you guys from ISKCON. You're always beating yourself up all the time." So I took a step back and I said, something, because he was new. I didn't want to say one thing or the other. But so I said something. But the point is that the beating will be there. It's better for us to beat ourselves rather than have others beat ourselves, rather than have material nature beat ourselves. So, right? So it's like the parent says to the kids that better I beat you rather than other people beat you, because that's for your benefit. So asking these questions obviously means that we will try and seek the answers and act upon them. The purpose of putting such heavy verses in the passage of Bhagavatam is exactly this, that it's meant to shake us and to have us question. So we have been given the process by the Acharyas, by Srila Prabhupada. Perhaps the only thing that I can add, definitely not anything new, but this is more from personal experience, is perseverance. That spirituality is by no means a cakewalk. When you read the philosophy, you think that you're walking towards Krishna, you're taking one step, Krishna is taking 10 steps, right? And the devotees are all merciful, magnanimous, etc., etc. All that's true. But there is also the purification that is needed before we can achieve all that. And we sometimes, or oftentimes, we are not willing to go through that purification. Right? Once I remember, and this is just my ego, that the Sunday feast at the temple, and I think I had gone somewhere, and I was really, really hungry. So I was first in the line of the prasadam to get the prasadam. And the person who was doing the service of arranging the serving prasadam, they didn't have enough people. So since I was at the top of the line, they said, "Prabhu, come and serve." And then I thought, well, at this point, I need the prasadam most, but anyway, he's asking, so let me serve him. But then I had in my mind this sense of, I've done this big sacrifice to serve devotees. And it so happened that whatever that 35, 40 minutes that I served, most of the devotees, most of the people I served were chastising me one way or the other. Don't put the dal on the chawal, put it on the side. What are you doing, Prabhu? I asked you to do this. How many times I have to tell you? And in my mind, I kept thinking that, I should be getting first dibs at the prasadam. I'm serving them on top of that. And this was not just one person. Person after person came and, they were getting upset at me for one thing or the other. Part of it was I was also not all there. I was distracted. That was part of it. But then later on, I think one thing is when the heat subsides and the light becomes more prominent. And later on, I realized that yes, sometimes we think that when you take to spirituality, everybody should give you obeisances, everybody should glorify you. But spirituality is about service, doing service in adverse circumstances. So I think that sense of perseverance is very, very important. And it goes a long way in dissolving our ego.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You could hear me. You were absolutely spot on onto that. Like, what I would see here is, in this audience at least, and it's like a curvy path, right? Like when our sadhana is good, our perseverance will be more stronger. Basically, at sometimes we wear that mask, right? Not just sometimes, every time. Even now I'm wearing some mask, what others don't know right now, right? So recently, from past few years, I don't know if you heard about Enneagram.
Okay.
This is being followed majorly by almost like Dhanurda Swami, or this is being given by Rasanath Prabhu and Hari Prasad Prabhu. Basically, what it, in a summary, like even Vilas Manjari is like a pro right now. Most of our devotees are taking that shelter and trying to see how it can help our devotees. Okay. So basically it has like 9 different types, and it's not less or more for those types. The whole, every person or a human is falling under this 9 different types. So 1 is like a leading character, or number 4 is like perfectionist. So there is a positive and the negative of those enneagrams. So why I'm saying all this is, I learned, like, if I know, like for you, I can say that you are number 2, like the type 2, right? Because you always give, and I follow. So we identify our own type and see where our negatives are, and where our strengths are, and wherever and then negatives. So the same thing we fall under to see the other person too. So in this case here, we have seen different things, like whether a person can fall at certain points or again pick up with his strength. So when we know, that will make us easier to even grow spiritually. And also my negative, let us say I'm very tired from my work at 6 o'clock and I want to relax, switch on my cricket or switch on my anything which is not relevant for spiritual progress. But at the same time, you rightly said, the beating which we are giving ourselves, is it really we have to do as a sadhaka? I don't know. Like, so this is again the learning. It's definitely the Bhagavatam gives us towards the purification, but the path to that purification is what we have to choose based on our strengths. Every person has their ability how to reach there. One may reach in 1 year, one may reach in 10 years, one may reach in 10 lifetimes. Who knows? But at the same time, we need to accept ourselves where we are and try to see where our negatives, they call, actually, I'm not that pro in that Enneagram, but really Vilas Manjari is getting more into it. And many of our devotees, you know about Radha Govinda from Mayapur. She has like humongous following in our devotees, like hundreds of devotees join her. It's only for Matajis. All problems, like all counseling, even Vilas Manjari is getting into that counseling and all with this type. It is really helping in the devotee community, basically. That's why I just a thought there as we are talking about this how we deal with our negatives and strengths as well.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, and I completely agree that if we know our strengths and weaknesses, then we can use our strengths and we can compensate for our weaknesses. So many times we lack self-awareness, right? And then we act on some platform that we think. And as long as that, the bigger the gap is, the more bewildering the results will be. So
You can Google it, Prabhu. I can give you some
How do you spell,
Enneagram. It
bro?
is, yeah.
How do you spell?
Enneagram. I'm typing it over here.
okay, and maybe you can put it in the chat. Okay, any other thoughts, questions?
Yes, Prabhu. While reading this, I can see that it's like a game of snake and ladders, and maybe we can, change the ladders. Meeting the devotees, we get some votes, we go, and then we get beaten by the desire of sex and intoxication, and then fall into the creepers like a hen. We can redo the snake and ladders game like for devotees with this description here.
You're absolutely right. That's what it is. We, at least in the material life, one step forward, one step back. So one of the analogies that it's an experiential analogy, but it's like running on the treadmill, right? You keep running and you're standing at the same position.
Going nowhere.
Yeah, going nowhere. But if you stop running, then the treadmill will throw you off. You fall really badly. That's the nature.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your realization. Let's move on. Hopefully,
Is there room for one more question, Prabhu?
Sure.
Regarding the, when it comes to spirituality, we don't give that much weightage, whereas when it comes to our duty or occupation or something like that, we give more weightage. That is very much happening in at least in my life, I could say that. So I at least, I try to explain this, or my close ones try to explain this, that Prabhupada says obligatory is the first, and then becomes the discretionary. So we put the obligatory category, the occupation that we do, under the obligatory category, and then the devotional service under the discretionary. So is it the right classification, or what does Prabhupada want to say here when he says first the emergency, then the obligatory, then the discretionary, and all those? So is it that's what Prabhupada is trying to say, or anything else is trying to say?
So that classification, I'm not sure specifically which statement of Prabhupada they're referring to, but generally that classification is given to different kind of karmas. There is nitya karma. There is activities that are subsistence karma, that you need to eat every day, you need to evacuate, you need to do some basic activities just to survive. You can't say that I'll stop eating, I'll stop walking. So those you have to do. The second kind of karma is the ones that are on special occasions. So these are samskars, that you have a marriage ceremony, you have mundan, you have annaprashan. So different activities that you do on special occasions. And the third kind is discretionary, giving in charity. You don't have to do it, but you choose to do it. But all three of them come in the category of karma. So they're material activities. As far as I know, it's not applied to material versus spiritual. Srila Prabhupada always said that prioritize things on a spiritual platform. Right? Rampal Maharaj gives this example I think I shared this in the past, that if you have to prioritize things, then the best way to fill up a beaker optimally is put the big stones, the small stones, the smaller stones, the sand, and the water. And that way you can fill everything. But if you put the water first and then the sand and then the small stones, you can never put the big stones there. Right? So the order, the prioritization is important. So make your spiritual life the big stones. That goes in first. Then put in the activities that you need to survive, and put in the activities that are discretionary. So that way you prioritize it. So you don't compromise on that which is for your ultimate which is for your ultimate benefit. And to a great extent, devotees do follow that, right? So the big stones in our life is chanting 16 rounds, Archavigraha Seva, Vaishnav Seva. So those are the things, they may shrink or increase, but those are the things that we prioritize right at the top. First life goes for that. Then, okay, job is obligatory. You have to do the job, right? You have to eat, you have to rest. So then that comes after that. And then more social activities, that okay, I have to go for a picnic to a friend or what, so the benefit of having the guidance of Guru and Prabhupada and ISKCON is that we very naturally kind of mold our lives around that. It may not be perfect all the time, obviously, because we are practicing devotees. We are practicing to do it, but that's what we are practicing. That's what is important. That this is what we, like the conversation I said, right? That I will to my friend that I feel bad that I'm missing my chanting in the morning, because that's what we are trained to prioritize. The first spiritual, then that which is necessary, and we build on that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the wonderful questions. Okay, so moving on, verse 19. Atha katham chet samiktapada punachasartham pravishtarandam advanyam shumin ajaya niveshito Brahman janodyapi navedakaschan.
O killer of the enemies, Maharaj Raghugana, if the conditioned soul somehow or other gets out of his dangerous position, he again returns to his home to enjoy sex life. For that he is a way of attachment. Thus, under the spell of the Lord's material energy, he continues to loiter in the forest of material existence. He does not discover his real interest even at the point of death.
So this is the last verse of the allegory. And the point that is made here is that this journey through the forest of material desire does not end with death. Right? So he says, if he somehow or else gets out of this dangerous position. So what was the dangerous position? That he is in a cave, there is an elephant, and somehow he's clinging on to wine, and he gets out of it. How does he get out of it? By dying. So when he dies, his decrepit body is discarded, he's out of the cave, the elephant is far away. But what does he do? He again, so in the allegory it said this merchant runs back to home again, to once again enjoy sex life. So what does the conditioned soul do? He again takes birth, and having taken the birth again, resumes the same journey again, ends at the same point, and again comes back. Right. So this is in the material world, this is the eternal cycle of Pravriti Marg. And Chakravarti Pad says that the person travels eternally on this path of Pravriti Marg because he does not know the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada says in the purport, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Prashanti Surya. This is the nature of the spiritualist. That those who are spiritually advanced simply look to the lotus feet of Vishnu. The conditioned soul, however, not being interested in reviving his relationship with Vishnu, becomes captivated by material activities and remains in everlasting bondage, being misled by so-called leaders. Next verse. Rahugana tvam api hayatvanosya sanyasta danda krita bhuta maitra asajjitatma harisevaya shitam Jnana samadaya taratiparam.
My dear King Rahugana, you are also a victim of the external energy. Being situated on the path of attraction to material pleasure, so that you may become an equal friend to all living entities. I now advise you to give up your kingly position and the rod by which you punish criminals. Give up attraction to the sense object and take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. Then you will be able to cut the hard knot of energy and cross to the other side of the ocean of desire.
So this is essentially the last verse spoken by Jad Bharat to Rahugana. So previous verse was the end of the allegory. Now, what's the so allegory is allegory, right? Fine, you told an allegorical story, but what's in it for me? So like a perfect preacher, Jad Bharat, he essentially said, this is what it means to you. So he says that you are also a victim of external energy. So this allegory, the person who's running around in the jungle, that is you. The person who is trying to get material pleasures, that is you. Right? But the purpose of Jad Bharat is not to condemn the king. But I think this point was being made by Prem Kishore Prabhu, that self-awareness is an important prerequisite to self-realization. So he's trying to, he's having established self-awareness, now he's trying to get him to the path of self-realization, right? So he gives him 5 specific instructions. So he says, and these are specific because they're actionable. Right? So ultimately the philosophy has to be translated into actions. The purpose of Bhagavatam, Vaishnava philosophy is not armchair philosophy. Right? That's the impersonalist bit, that they keep speculating on the nature of the Brahman while not doing anything. Vaishnava theology is that it will always translate into practical, actionable instructions. So he gives 5 instructions. He says, first is, you give up your kingly position. Second is, give up the attraction to the sense object. Third is, give up the rod by which you punish criminals. Fourth is, become an equal friend to all living entities. And 5 is, take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. Right? So, successive levels of material detachment. So, the king was very much attached to his position as a king. If you remember, that's what started the whole interaction. As a king, he was sitting on the palanquin and he was forcing others to carry his palanquin. And then when Jad Bharat was stumbling, then he was very righteously angry that I need to chastise you. I am your king and you're causing discomfort to me. Right? So that was the manifestation of a very high level of palsy. So firstly, give up that kingly position. Second, give up attraction to the sense objects. This everybody has. You don't have to be a king to have attraction to sense objects. So the second is that after having given up this ego of being a king, Now you give up attraction to the sense objects. Third is give up the rod by which you punish criminals, which means that give up your enviousness to other people. So the first two are with respect to the king himself, and the second two are with respect to the people that the king relates to. So give up the rod by which you punish criminals means that stop being envious of people. The fourth is be equal friend. So not being envious gets you to a point of neutrality, but that's not enough. You become a friend to all living entities. And the fifth is transitioning over to Bhakti. Taking up the sword of knowledge, take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. Right? And then he gives two results. He promises two results. He says that you will be able to cut the hard knot of illusory energy. And the second is you will be able to cross over the other side of the ocean of Nishayans. Right? So, one might say that in order to do the first four, you have to cut the hard knot of illusory energy. It's a catch-22. But that's where faith comes into play. That a person, without having given up this hard knot of illusory energy, but because of faith in Guru, follows the instructions, then that which the Guru promises will be delivered. And so this is what breaks this cyclical dependency, which is implicit faith in the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So one may not have given up the attraction to sense objects, but one may restrain themselves from the sense objects. One may not have given up one's enviousness, but one may refuse to act on the platform of envious. One may not be an equal friend to all living entities, but one develops a service attitude to compensate for that. So based on faith, when one does that, the result is that the knot of illusory energy gets cut. And then all that the person was doing simply based on theoretical faith becomes practical realization. So Prabhupada in the purport, he quotes 15.3 to 4, and since this is Purushottam Mas, I'll read out the verse. Chapter 15, as you know, is Purushottam. One of the chapters that is read during this month. It is Purushottam Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. Narupam asya tathoplabhayate nanto na chade na cha sampratishtha ashvatham menam suvirudamulam asanga shastrena judena chitva tatha padam tat parimagritvam yasmin gatana nivranti bhuya tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yataha pravrati prashata purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this tree with the weapon of detachment. So doing, one must seek that place from which, having once gone, one never returns. And there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything has begun and in whom everything is abiding since time immemorial. Right? So with the weapon of knowledge. This is just trivia that there are three places at least three, there may be more, three places that I know of where there is comparisons to the sword in different ways. So in the 4th chapter, this is the last verse in the 4th chapter, transcendental knowledge is compared to sword. Right? Krishna says that the doubts that have risen should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Right? So knowledge is compared, sword is compared to knowledge. Then in this set of verses 15.3 to 4, detachment is compared to sword, right? Asanga Shastrena. So with the sword of detachment. And then the third is actually in Bhagavatam 1 to 15, where the remembrance of the Lord is compared to sword, where it said that with sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of karma by remembering the Lord. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? Okay, so I'll stop here, a little bit over time, and next week we will finish the chapter and start with the next chapter, which essentially is the explanation of the analogy. And the purports are reiterating similar points that were made. So thank you for your attention. We'll end with the prayers. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavind ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanand. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.